I couldn't think of a good intro for this video, so I'll just jump into it. Prior to 264, relations between Rome and Carthage had actually been quite friendly, with both of them fighting against Pyrrhus and having signed a few treaties here and there, so the war was a bit of a blindside when it did occur. Despite this, I think that a conflict between the two states would have erupted at some point regardless, considering Roman bellicosity and the issues which two equal powers existing as neighbours naturally brought about. Either way, any contemporary Punic or Roman would not have thought that their nations were about to embark upon a 23-year slugging match, or that it would have been only the first in a 3-round fight. This begs the question, if Romano-Punic relations were generally warm in the lead up to the war, what sort of cock-up led to war in the first place? Well, it was an interesting cock-up indeed, and one which requires us to go back to the 310s. During one of the Sicilian wars, the Tyrant of Syracuse, Agathocles, captured the city of Messana on the northern tip of the island. Always needing troops for his wars against Carthage, Agathocles made use of many mercenaries. One such group was a band called the Mamertines. After their employer died in 289, these mercenaries were without money or a patron to provide it, always a sordid combination. Somehow the Mamertines were allowed into Messana and treacherously took the city for themselves. In the years after this, they raided into the surrounding territory and stayed neutral during the Pyrrhic invasion of the island. The Pyrrhic hurricane left the island almost as quickly as it had arrived, and the status quo was soon restored. Conflict between the Mamertines and Hiero, the new tyrant of Syracuse, began to flare up in the early 260s, with Hiero winning 2 battles against the mercenaries and breaking their power. With their prospects looking grim, they took an inventive course of action, and asked for aid from both Rome and Carthage. And it was Carthage who acted first, and it was easy to see why. Messana controlled the route to Italy, and preventing it from falling into Syracusan hands, especially with the energetic Hiero on the throne, would be key to seeing Punic power in Sicily reach yet unseen peaks. In 265, Carthage installed a minor garrison in the Messana citadel, and Hiero, not wanting to roll the dice, left for home. This was not a surprising course of action, as Carthage had a long vested interest in the island. The Romans, on the other hand, were more devious. No Roman had stood upon non-Italian soil before, and the stench of hypocrisy hung around as only a few years ago another group of Italian troops garrisoned by Rome in the newly won town of Rhegium across from Messana had also massacred the inhabitants and taken the city for their own. Exactly what the Mamertines had done, and they were met with fire and fury from the Romans, having them all executed back in Rome. Furthermore, a man named Claudius Appius Caudex, who was appointed to the command, saw a gleaming opportunity for glorious conquest and was able to convince both the Senate and the people with the regular shebang of loot and treasure, as well as pointing out the more pertinent fact that letting Syracuse take Messana would create a powerful Greek state just south of the freshly conquered Greeks of Italy, who could cause a lot of trouble for them in the future. Now the two most powerful states of the Mediterranean were barreling towards each other, and towards 2 decades of war. A Roman army under Claudius began marching south, but were initially unable to cross the straits between Sicily and Italy. Eventually he himself was able to cross and secured a deal with the Mamertines, which saw the Carthaginians ejected from Messana. He was eventually able to bring his entire force over during the night. Following on from this, a series of failed negotiations quickly broke down, with the only outcome being a pragmatic alliance between Carthage and Syracuse. Claudius took the initiative and attacked Hiero's camp and scored a small victory, seeing the Greek run back to Syracuse with his tail between his legs. In another episode, Claudius defeated the Carthaginians in another skirmish, driving them back too. Soon after, he launched a large-scale raid into Syracusan territory, although nothing beyond that was achieved, and Claudius's term of office ended and he withdrew. Next year, 40,000 troops under both consuls landed on the island, and this huge display of Roman power convinced many cities to switch sides, while others were captured. They then moved south to Syracuse, and Hiero signed a peace treaty with the Romans where he became an official friend of Rome, and paid a war indemnity. This treaty would stay in effect for decades to come, and Hiero made the wise choice of never straying from his alliance with Rome. Carthage began to assemble a large army with the aim of driving the Romans from Sicily. However, the Romans moved swiftly and took their 40,000 to the city of Agrigentum, which the Carthaginians intended to use as their main base of operations. Upon reaching the city, they were able to take control of its surroundings with no resistance, as the force currently in the city was small. Not used to the logistical concerns of fielding an army this far from home, they immediately began to forage for supplies in the local country. Seeing this dispersed enemy army, the garrison commander, Hannibal, no, not that one, launched an effective sally against the Romans which nearly saw them overrun, but the small camp guard was effectively able to push back the Punic attack and inflict some casualties. Hannibal did not attempt any more sallies, and any chance of capturing the city through treachery was non-existent, so the Romans would be forced into a long and grueling siege, as they had yet to master siege warfare to the extent required for such a large and well-fortified city. Fortunately for them, Agrigentum did not have its own port, so they set up a large circumvallating ditch and put up their fleet. Its army finally built, Carthage began its first true strike against the Romans. Roughly 50,000 men, 6,000 horse, and some elephants under the command of Hanno landed at the port of Heraclea Minoa, just down the coast from Agrigentum, and set off against the Romans. His first course of action was to seize the Roman supply depot, and the Romans were soon feeling the pressure. Hanno moved further in, and his Numidian cavalry utterly routed the Romans in a large skirmish. Hanno began upon the final march and encamped upon a hill overlooking the Romans. Despite his offers, they refused to give battle, so for 2 months the armies stared at each other until finally the starving Romans and the frenzied requests of Hannibal forced each army to battle. Details on the battle are scarce, so there's much interpretation involved in seeing how the battle played out. The Carthaginians seemed to be organised into more than one line, with the more inexperienced and some mercenaries forming up the first line, while elephants and more troops formed the second. The Romans were likely drawn up in their famous triplex aeques. After a grisly battle, the Romans routed their enemy's first line, and soon this panic spread to the rear lines. Soon they had all routed, and the Romans had won a great victory, one of only 4 major land battles fought over the course of the war. Just like that, 3,000 Carthaginians died, while 4,000 were captured, and a few hundred cavalry were killed. The elephants, on the other hand, were mostly captured and killed, showing that the Carthaginians were not yet experienced in elephant warfare, as they had failed to use them effectively during the battle. After a rocky start, the Romans had revived their campaign in Sicily, and Hannibal, seeing the pendulum swinging the other way, decided to mount a daring escape with his skeleton garrison, and since the Romans were overjoyed at their victory, they were able to escape with ease. Agrigentum was in Roman hands, and the Senate decided to continue the war, looking to drive Carthage from Sicily in its entirety. This is where we will leave the story for now. Like the video if you liked it, and I'm away.